Wall of Stories. Every year, around 100,000 people from many classes, cultures, backgrounds and countries come to Hadrian's Wall in the northeast of England. Most people think of it as an ancient artefact. You know, like a piece of pottery or an axe head, except that it's 84 miles long. It's a big old Roman wall, right? And yet, if it's your first visit, the first thing you're likely to ask is, where is the wall? That's because it's woven into the landscape, built along existing lines of rock, winding in and out of the earth, over and under the dips and crests. It's never the same from one day to the next. As the land changes around it, so the wall changes too. Every footstep, every molehill, every sheep track, every baking hot summer or wet, rainy spring makes it change again. Even the physical wall is ever changing. But my story is about the metaphysical wall. From 1900 years ago when it was begun, right up to now, the present, onward into an unseen future, it's a geological, ecological and human phenomenon. As it was built, it drew people from Gaul, Syria, Denmark, Frisia and Turkey. They built, dug, quarried, guarded, bought things, sold things, loved, lost things, had parties, got angry, made stuff, cooked, ate, slept, worshipped and died by the wall. This activity has never stopped. It's happening now and it will happen tomorrow. You could say that it's a wall made from stone, but it's just as true to say that it's a wall made of stories. Surtees Forrester was 14 when he got his first job at the wall, digging for an archaeological excavation. When World War I started, he enlisted and soon afterwards was killed in France. His body was not discovered for 21 years. His story formed part of an exhibition at Corbridge Museum, and it's as much a part of the wall as the bricks are. There are a billion tales woven together, but today I'm going to unpick two. We're going to hear about Jessie Mothersole and Elizabeth Hodgson. When I spoke to two of the volunteer guides on the wall, they told me that if I want to make this story relevant to folk in the northeast, I'll have to tell you what teams the two women supported. Unfortunately, history doesn't record, but at a guess, Elizabeth Hodgson would have supported Carlisle United, and Jessie Mothersole would possibly have supported an early women's team. Or maybe she would have supported Arsenal. I hope that sheds some light on them for you. In 1888, Elizabeth Hodgson came to live in a big house outside Carlisle called Newby Grange. It's still standing right near the west end of the wall. She moved to the wall on her marriage to Thomas Hesketh Hodgson. The couple had one daughter, Catherine Sophia. To help them live, they had a nurse, a cook, a table maid, a housemaid and a coachman who all lived in, as well as daily servants. History shows that, via her husband, Elizabeth became obsessed by the wall. In her plentiful spare time, she joined with Thomas to excavate and measure various parts of the wall, especially what's called the turf wall and the vallum, the mysterious ditch. We're told that she measured and recorded her results with exceptional thoroughness, care and lack of ego for year after year. And she didn't just measure and sketch. She guided visitors and she collected local folk customs, and she collected stories. Here's a little example from her paper on some surviving fairies. There was once a fairy who looked just like a hare. A man caught it for a hare to make his Sunday dinner. When it was in the bag, it called out, "Let me go to my daddy." The man was angry and said, "Go to the daddy." And the fairy jumped out and ran away. The man was very disappointed not to get his Sunday dinner. There's much more to say about fairies who've been seen near Hadrian's Wall, but of course, that's another story. In 1920, aged 54, Jessie Mothersole came to visit the wall. She was a very different kind of woman, an artist from Hampstead in London, pupil of famous arts and crafts painter Henry Holliday. She was artistically, personally and politically radical, not married and didn't have any children. She had been inspired to walk the length of the wall and paint the landscapes. To go with the paintings, she wrote a lively travelogue about day-to-day events and people she met, as well as archaeological discoveries. Her book was hugely popular and went into multiple editions, most recently in 2007. She was one of the first people to record that there was a sycamore tree in a sheep enclosure in Craigloch. There's much more to say about that sycamore tree, but that's another story too. On 3 occasions in her book, she refers to Elizabeth Hodgson's archaeological findings, and Hodgson is also thanked in the credits. They also met. In September 1920, after her solo walk, Jessie Mothersole joined around 50 other curious and committed folk for a large guided tour called a pilgrimage. The company were to spend 3 days being ferried around the site by steam railway, motorcar and horse-drawn buggies. At each stop, they would have a lecture from an expert on the wall. These 2 very different women. I'd like us to use our imaginations to picture their meeting. Are you ready? It's raining pretty hard. The pilgrims abandon their motor carriages by the road in a long line. Their coats flap in the wind as they hike over a wide, muddy field under an infinitely broad and heavy sky to examine the remains of turret 50B. It's known, for some reason which no one's explained to me, as Apple Tree. Although the air is clean, there's an ever-present whiff of coal from the railway mines and quarries which break the land and churn out smoke only a few miles away, right alongside the wall. Our group gathers around the remains, a broken brick wall around a metre tall. Jessie Mothersole is to the front of the crowd, a sturdy, healthy figure, her skin tanned brown by her summer adventures, her hat pulled down. Her stylish London Macintosh collar is turned up against the wet. Elizabeth Hodgson climbs onto a gap in the turret and starts to speak. At this time, she's 66 years old, but she seems younger. She stands upright and tall as she lectures confidently in an upper-class Cambridge accent. She talks about the indisputable results of her findings. Let the men argue about their significance, she says. She is simply a dispassionate observer. I like to imagine they met each other's eyes across the brick, and despite their many differences, each woman, at that moment, recognised a kindred spirit. Eye to eye. Hadrian's Wall changed the lives of Elizabeth Hodgson and Jessie Mothersole. You'd agree that, wouldn't you? But they also changed the wall in return. Let me explain. Elizabeth, along with her husband, was part of an early surge of interest in the wall. In the 1890s, she laid essential groundwork for the Edwardian excavations. Her discoveries in learned papers and guiding fed a wider interest and understanding of the history of the site. Her measurements of the vallum haven't been bettered and are still referred to today. Her only child, Sophia, went on to be president of the Cumberland and Westmoreland Archaeological Society. And Jessie Mothersole's book inspired many more travellers to visit and value the wall as well. Her paintings created iconic images which helped to give a visual identity to the site. For example, cigarette cards of the wall have been found which, although not credited, are plainly inspired by her paintings. They were both part of a movement which led to the wall being scheduled as an ancient monument in 1924, which was a great victory and a joy to both of them, because it finally provided protection for the site. It means that anyone who owns the land will be held liable for damage to the wall, including, for the first time, protection against quarrying. Mothersole, Hodgson, and people like them brought the wall to the attention of the wider world. They took the wall into the future. A place to protect, a window to the past, a home. A place made of stories. A resource, a landscape, a film location, ecology, psychopath. A place to scatter ashes, to put on Instagram, to dress up as a gladiator, to bond with your family. I could go on. A community. All of these stories. Those 100,000 persons who visit the wall every year become part of the story, as have I. And as you listen to me, you're part of it too. As a people who've not yet been born, because Hadrian's Wall never stops. It carries on. 1 billion stories intertwined towards a future we can't even imagine. As the bricks themselves weave in and out of the earth, its line stretches away, always renewing and changing, always changing us.